everyone, this is Wandering Tati. For this episode of the discussion series, we are going to have a look at 6 famous philosophical ideas. This list is based mostly on the book 100 Things to Know About Philosophy and Ethics by Ben Dupré and some other sources that I will add in the description. One important subfield of philosophy is known as epistemology, the study of knowledge. Epistemologists focused on 2 main problems. First, to determine the nature of knowledge. That is, what does it mean to say that someone knows or fails to know something. And second, to determine the extent of human knowledge. How much do we or can we know? How we use our reason, our senses, the testimony of others, and other resources to acquire knowledge. Are there limits to what we can know? Are some things unknowable? We will now revise 6 famous ideas proposed by a variety of philosophers regarding epistemology. There is a bunch of things I would like to discuss about each of these ideas, so I might need to separate this video into 2 parts. This one is part 1. For this first scenario, I'm going to ask you to picture a mad, evil scientist who, in one of their diabolical experiments, would have extracted the brain from a person and somehow placed it in a recipient with all the nutrients required to keep it alive. Its nervous endings would be connected to a computer that would elicit the experience for that person/brain that everything is normal. For that person/brain, there would appear to be other people, objects, landscapes, and so on. But in reality, every single thing that person experiences, including the perception of their own body, is the result of impulses that the computer sends to the brain's nerve endings. The question is, could you tell without any shadow of a doubt that you are not a brain in a vat? Yes, you say? Well, that is exactly what a brain in a vat would say. Are you actually a person watching this video right now? Or is everything about the world that you come across with, including this video that might or might not make you question the reality of your life, something produced by the computer controlling it all? I did mention that they were an evil scientist. If this reminds you of the movie The Matrix, it is because it is somewhat based on this idea. You probably don't think that you are a brain in a vat. Most of us don't. But the main issue here is, can we know for sure? And the most scary thing about this is that if we were a brain in a vat, then everything we think we know about the world would be false. This scenario was developed by Hilary Putnam in 1981 in his book Reason, Truth and History. But the ideas behind it came from earlier in time. It is related to Descartes' evil genie introduced in Meditations on First Philosophy in 1641, a being whose main aim is to trick us, an idea that drove Descartes into applying his methodic doubt regarding every belief that could be subject to any degree of uncertainty, which of course includes our own senses. Actually, both Putnam and Descartes were sort of playing devil's advocate with their scenarios, trying to criticize skepticism. But to their own dismay, they managed to create great arguments in favor of it seems. By the way, skepticism in the philosophical sense is not quite the same as we use it in a colloquial way. That is, having doubts and reservations as to the truth of something presented to you, which is the best approach to have if you ask me. But in philosophy is a current that proposes the theory that certain knowledge is impossible. We might think we know many things, but how can we justify the claim? Our so-called knowledge is based on the perceptions of the world obtained through our senses, usually mediated by the use of our reason. But aren't our perceptions mistaken sometimes? Can we be absolutely sure that we are not in a dream or experiencing a hallucination? After all, if we were in those situations, we wouldn't be able to tell. Another interesting proposition mentioned in Dupre's book is that of Nick Bostrom, who in his paper, Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? From 2003, argues that, well, yes, we probably are. He claims that if it is true that, as predicted by many, enormous amounts of computing power will be available in the future, then it is likely that people from the future will run many detailed simulations of their ancestors or of people like their ancestors. And since their computers would be so powerful, they could run a great number of simulations. Suppose that these simulated people are conscious, as they would be if the simulations were sufficiently fine-grained and if a certain quite widely accepted position in the philosophy of mind is correct. Then it could be the case that the vast majority of minds like ours do not belong to the original race, but rather to people simulated by the advanced descendants of an original race. Therefore, if we do not believe that we are currently in a computer simulation, then we are not entitled to believe that we will have descendants who will run lots of such simulations. This time, imagine you've been a prisoner your whole life inside a cavern. Your hands and feet are in chains, and your head is placed so that you can only see the wall in front of you. Behind you there's a flame, and between you and the fire, a runway in which your captors move around all types of objects. The shadows of these objects are all that you and the other prisoners have ever seen. You do not even know that you are prisoners, since you have been captive your entire lives. The cave is all you know. Now suppose that one day you are set free from your chains. At first, you see the fire and get blinded by it, but little by little you get used to it, and one day you dare to get out of the cave and see the outside world. You see that there's all kinds of things out there, illuminated by a light-emitting object which is way larger than the flame you know so well. After this, you realize that it is the sun by which you see all things. The sun is here analogous to the form of the good. In a sense, Plato represented the knowledge of this world as the shadows that we, regular people, represented by the prisoners, see from inside the cave, while the outside of the cavern, the real world, represents the world of ideas or forms, which is perfect, eternal, and immutable. In Plato's The Republic, Book 7, Socrates is the one who presents the allegory of the cave, which represents the philosopher's education from ignorance to knowledge of the forms. True education is the turning around of the soul from shadows and visible objects to true understanding of the forms. Philosophers who accomplish this understanding will be reluctant to do anything other than contemplate the forms, but they must be forced to return to the cave and rule it. Plato would pose, for instance, that a tomato that looks red at noon might look black at night, and so nothing in the empirical world is an object of knowledge. This discussion is related to what's known as the problem of the universals. Universals are a class of mind-independent entities, usually contrasted with individuals or so-called particulars, postulated to ground and explain relations of qualitative identity and resemblance among individuals. Individuals are said to be similar in virtue of sharing universals. An apple and a tomato are both red, for example, and their common redness results from sharing a universal. If they are both red at the same time, then the universal red must be in two places at once. This makes universals quite different from individuals, and it makes them controversial. The question here is whether universals are in fact required to explain relations of qualitative identity and resemblance among individuals. Realists endorse universals. Conceptualists and nominalists refuse to accept universals and deny that they are needed. The question now is, when we see, hear, smell or touch something, we probably think that the thing in question is more or less as we perceive it, right? But is it so easy to claim that this is the case? The British philosopher John Locke coined a famous metaphor regarding this question. He suggested that human knowledge is some sort of completely dark closet, with only a few openings through which external visible appearances or ideas of outside things enter. This poses a problem. We could assume that these ideas that enter the closet are more or less representations of what's really out there. But this is nothing more than an inference. Our ideas are all that we have access to, and they form an impenetrable veil of perception between us and the outside world. All we actually perceive is the veil that covers the world, a veil that consists of our sense data. What then justifies our belief that there is a world beyond that veil? Since we can only directly perceive our sense data, all of our beliefs about the external world may be false. There may not actually be any tomatoes or apples in the world, merely sense data in our minds. Locke considered that the fact that exterior objects would be separated from interior ideas would disarm the skeptic. He considered that the red color of a tomato is not a property of the tomato itself, but a product of the interaction of several factors, including physical attributes of the tomato itself, like its texture or structure, the peculiarities of our sensitive system, and the ambient conditions at the moment of observation. Those qualities do not belong to the tomato itself and are thus secondary qualities. But the tomato also possesses some primary qualities that exist within the object, such as its shape and size, which do not depend on the conditions in which it is observed nor in the existence of an observer. Locke considered that the primary qualities are extremely similar to the objects themselves and that they provide knowledge. One of the main critics of Locke is the Irish philosopher George Berkeley. In his idealist theory of knowledge from 1710, he begins his argument with an attack on John Locke's distinction between primary and secondary qualities and argues that there is no distinction between the two categories at all. He begins by establishing a basic foundation of empiricism, that we know things only through sense experience. He uses the following example. A person can make one of their hands cold and the other hot. The same person can then put both hands inside a vessel of lukewarm water. The water will feel cold to the hot hand and warm to the cold hand. But it would be a contradiction to say that the same water is both cold and hot at the same time. Therefore, temperature exists only in the mind and not in the object. According to Berkeley, only ideas exist, and reality is comprised of ideas. And then he proposes that for an idea to be existing, it must be perceived by someone or something. But real things continue to exist even when no person is perceiving them. For example, when everyone leaves a room, the room does not disappear. Therefore, ideas which are unperceived by people must be perceived by something. According to Berkeley, that something is the infinite mind of God. He concludes that all nature continues to exist because it is always being perceived by God. So that is all for the first part of this video on 6 things to know about philosophy of knowledge. I really hope you found it valuable. If you did, please hit the like button to let me know. And please let me know your opinions about our attainment of knowledge in the comments. What do you think of each of these philosophical ideas? Have you heard them before? Is any of them new to you? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Until next time!